How would you respond if fire suddenly fell from the sky, sparked by a single fearless prayer, right in the heart of a spiritual war? Elijah, a man whose faith could not be shaken, stood alone and defied the prophets of Baal. His daring challenge? That God himself would send fire from heaven to prove beyond all doubt that he alone is the one true God. Curious how one man faced a wicked king and shifted the fate of an entire nation through sheer conviction? Then buckle up. This isn't just a tale of the miraculous, it's a masterclass in boldness and belief that you cannot afford to miss. Tap that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us as we explore stories that inspire unshakable faith and unstoppable courage. Long ago, when the people of Israel strayed from the path, chasing idols and fleeting pleasures, a deep spiritual darkness fell across the land. Under the rule of King Ahab, manipulated by the ruthless Queen Jezebel, the worship of Baal spread like wildfire. The voices that once cried out to the living God were silenced beneath pagan chants and festivals. A nation that had tasted divine power now seemed to have forgotten his promises. It was into this darkness that Elijah stepped, a humble man with a heart ignited by faith. God had chosen him to rise as a beacon of truth, a voice to stand boldly against injustice and idolatry. Elijah didn't have wealth or an army, but he had something stronger, the unshakable knowledge that he was sent by God. The future of Israel rested on his shoulders, and he was ready for the challenge. With unwavering resolve, Elijah made his way to the palace of King Ahab. His footsteps echoed down the halls, his heart pounding in defiance as he prepared to confront one of the most powerful men alive. Then and there, Elijah spoke words that would alter history forever. As surely as the Lord lives, there will be no rain or even dew in the land until I say so. Elijah's words struck the air like a thunderclap, rippling through the kingdom like a stone dropped into still water, sending waves of dread across every corner of Israel. Before the stunned King Ahab, the sky seemed to hold its breath. The breeze that once whispered gently now carried with it a chilling omen. Each day that followed brought harsher heat, as the sun scorched the earth with unrelenting fury. The once lush land began to crack open beneath the weight of Elijah's prophecy. Rivers dried, crops withered, and it was as if nature itself had vanished at his command. Watching from a distance, Elijah stood firm, not with pride, but with the quiet resolve of a man who knew he was doing God's will. This drought was no ordinary disaster. It was judgment, a loud and unmistakable cry from heaven against the tide of idolatry that had swallowed the nation. The people, once blind in their comfort, began to awaken to the power behind the prophet's voice. The ground kicked up dust at every step, and the hollow eyes of thirsty children told a story of suffering that spread like wildfire. Elijah, though unwavering in spirit, understood the danger he now faced. Ahab and Jezebel burned with rage, and their wrath made him a marked man. But God, ever watchful, led Elijah away from danger, into the wilderness, into solitude, into a forgotten ravine known only to the faithful, Cherith Brook. There, amid whispering waters and the chorus of birds, Elijah found shelter. And it was in this barren place, where life seemed impossible, that God sent his first miracle. Ravens, black-winged, unlikely messengers, descended daily bringing him food. These creatures, once thought unclean, became vessels of divine provision, feeding the prophet like royal servants at the command of the King of Heaven. Time passed slowly by the brook. Elijah watched its waters dwindle, day after day. The once steady stream was now a fragile trickle. And still, through the silence of the desert, the flapping wings of the ravens continued, faithful as ever, bringing bread, bringing hope. Even as he found shelter, Elijah knew the drought he had spoken into existence would not spare any corner, not even this place of refuge. Each morning, as the golden sun crept above the horizon, the brook's waters shrank a little more, retreating like a final breath. Still, Elijah stood unshaken, anchored by unwavering faith in God's provision. Though the desert around him seemed lifeless, he trusted that the same God who had sealed the skies had also written a greater purpose. But the peace of Cherith did not last. One morning the stream ran dry. No sound of trickling water. Only silence. That's when God's voice came once more. "Go," he said, "to Zarephath, a city beyond Israel's borders. There a widow will care for you." Zarephath, a pagan land. And a widow? Someone already trapped in poverty? Elijah understood the weight of this command. To obey meant to trust beyond logic, to walk into foreign soil and ask a woman with nearly nothing to give, everything. But he did not hesitate. With determined steps, Elijah left the barren brook behind, his eyes fixed on the unknown. Dust rose beneath his feet as he crossed the arid lands until he arrived at the city's gates, and there he saw her. A fragile woman bent over, gathering sticks. Her hands were worn, her frame thin. Her eyes held exhaustion and quiet despair. The widow of Zarephath lifted her gaze to Elijah, startled by his presence. In her trembling hands were a handful of flour and a splash of oil, the last meal for herself and her son. And now this unknown prophet stood before her, asking for it. Her heart sank. Hunger already clung to her bones. This bread was to be their final comfort before the end. And yet, something in Elijah's voice stilled her panic. A calm that pierced through fear. A peace that didn't make sense. Then Elijah spoke, his voice steady, kind. "Do not be afraid. Go and do as you've said. But first, bake a small cake for me. After that, make one for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord says. The flour in your jar will not run dry, and the oil will not run out, until the day the Lord sends rain upon the earth." A promise that defied reason. Impossible. Unreal. Yet somehow, the widow believed. Perhaps it was desperation. Or maybe, just maybe, there was a final glimmer of hope in the darkness. She turned to her small, worn kitchen. With trembling hands, she baked the last bit of dough and gave the cake to Elijah. When the prophet returned to the jar and the oil pot, his eyes widened, astonished. The flour was still there. The oil still dripping. A miracle. And it didn't stop. Day after day, as the sun rose and fell, the flour never diminished. The oil kept flowing. Life, once on the brink of death, was restored each morning. What once was despair became quiet survival. But peace is often brief. One day the silence in the widow's house shattered. A cry, a gut-wrenching wail of anguish, pierced the air. Her son, who had survived hunger and drought, had fallen terribly ill. His breathing weakened with each passing day. His skin turned ghostly pale. His body, once resilient, now faded like sand slipping through open fingers. The widow could only watch, powerless. Her tears flowed freely as her heart crumbled. Elijah, who had seen heaven's fire and earth's drought, now saw something worse, human suffering that cut deep. Then the worst happened. The boy's chest stilled. No breath. No movement. Death had come. The sound of the widow's heartbreak echoed through the walls. She turned on Elijah, her grief twisted with fury and pain. "What have I done to you, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin, and to kill my son?" Her words cut like a blade. But Elijah didn't recoil. His heart broke too, but he would not give in to grief. Gently, he took the boy from his mother's arms and carried him upstairs. In his small room, he laid the lifeless body on the bed. Then, with a faith that defied logic, Elijah knelt over the child and cried out to God, "O Lord my God, I beg you, bring this boy back to life." The room fell into heavy silence. Time itself seemed to stop. Elijah prayed again, his voice trembling with emotion. And then, like a whisper from heaven, the child stirred. His chest rose. A breath. Life returned. Life returned slowly, almost mysteriously, and the boy's eyes fluttered open. Elijah's face broke into a smile of quiet hope as he lifted the child and gently placed him back into his mother's arms. A surge of joy flooded the house, like a ray of sunlight breaking through the darkest of clouds. But Elijah's mission was far from complete. The word of his miraculous deeds had already spread across the land of Israel, and the relentless drought had begun to push its people to the edge. The parched earth cried out for rain, and the people, starving, cried out for food. Yet, the prophet knew in his heart that the time of reckoning was fast approaching. Then a clear command came from God. The moment had arrived to face the prophets of Baal, to demonstrate the true power of the God of Israel. Elijah returned to the palace, unshaken by the harsh glare of King Ahab, and issued the challenge. Mount Carmel would be the battleground, and all the people would witness the confrontation. Who then is the true God? Driven by his arrogance and unwavering trust in the 450 prophets of Baal, Ahab accepted the challenge. A date was set, and the people gathered on the mountaintop, eager with anticipation. The air was thick with tension as Elijah's voice rang out across the valley, steady and commanding, "Bring 2 bulls. The prophets of Baal may choose one. Prepare the altar and call upon your God. I will do the same. The God who answers with fire, he will be the true God." The prophets of Baal wasted no time, beginning their ritual at dawn. They danced, they shouted, they cried out to their God, their desperate voices piercing the morning air. But there was nothing. Silence, heavy and oppressive. As hours passed, their desperation deepened. Elijah, watching them from the edge, could no longer hold back. With a sharp edge to his voice, he taunted them, "Cry louder. Perhaps he's sleeping, or maybe he's on a journey." The day wore on, and the frantic actions of the prophets of Baal only spiraled into chaos. Then it was Elijah's turn. With a calm that stood in stark contrast to the frantic despair of the Baal prophets, he stepped forward. The altar was already prepared, and the stones, soaked through with water, seemed to mock the very idea of fire. Yet, Elijah moved with serene confidence, as though he knew exactly how this battle would end. The people, their curiosity piqued and their breaths held in suspense, watched the prophet's every movement. The sky hung in a perfect, cloudless blue, and the parched earth awaited the result of what was about to unfold. Elijah raised his hands to the heavens, and with a simple yet powerful prayer filled with unwavering faith, he spoke, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, may it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, breaking through the stillness, came a deep rumble, a sound like distant thunder rolling across the land. Suddenly the heavens split open. A column of fire descended from the sky, engulfing the sacrifice, the stones, the water, and even the dust around the altar. The flames roared with such intensity that the heat was almost unbearable. It was an unmistakable sign of the undeniable power of God. The people, awestruck and overcome by the sight, fell to their knees. With trembling voices they cried out, "The Lord is God! The Lord is God!" Elijah stood victorious, his challenge answered. The false prophets of Baal had been exposed for what they were, and the spiritual drought that had gripped Israel seemed at last to be breaking. But Elijah knew that the battle was not yet over. The fire from the heavens had come, but the rain, the long-awaited rain, was still absent. The sky that had responded with fire now stood silent, and the earth remained as dry as ever. Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, his heart heavy with anticipation. Kneeling on the ground, he prayed, not once but 7 times. Each time he sent his servant to look toward the horizon, only to return with the same report, "There is nothing." Yet on the 7th time, a small cloud appeared, a tiny speck on the horizon, no bigger than the size of a man's hand. It was a humble, timid sign, but Elijah's heart leaped with recognition. Something great was about to happen. Still kneeling, his faith unshaken, he stood up swiftly, his eyes fixed on the small cloud. "Go, run to the king," he commanded his servant. "Tell him to prepare his chariot, for the rain is coming." The servant, though seeing nothing but a small cloud, obeyed without hesitation. Elijah remained on the mountaintop, his gaze fixed on the sky, knowing that God's answer was already on its way. In a matter of moments, the clouds began to gather, dark and dense, spreading across the sky like a heavy cloak. The wind picked up, howling through the air, and with it came the long-forgotten scent of rain. The earth itself seemed to hold its breath, eagerly awaiting the moment of redemption. Then the first drops began to fall, light at first, like whispers of promise. But within moments they intensified, transforming into a torrential downpour. The sound of the rain striking the parched ground was like music to the ears of Elijah and the people of Israel. The land, once cracked and lifeless, now absorbed the water greedily, as though it were a thirsty traveler in the desert. King Ahab, desperate to escape the rain that was now falling relentlessly, hurried toward his chariot, racing against time. But Elijah, empowered by the strength of God, ran ahead of the king's chariot as if he were a flash of lightning cutting through the wet fields. The prophet who had announced the drought now ran through the storm he himself had foretold, a living testament to the power of God. Word of Elijah's victory, and the rain that had finally come to the dry land, spread quickly. But the news soon reached the ears of Queen Jezebel, a woman infamous for her cruelty and unwavering devotion to false gods. Her fury knew no bounds. Her pride, wounded deeply by Elijah's triumph, ignited a fire of rage within her. The power Elijah had displayed was undeniable, and it became a threat she could no longer tolerate. In a fit of wrath, Jezebel sent a clear and deadly message. The threat of Jezebel rang in Elijah's ears like the roar of thunder. "May the gods punish me if I do not make your life like that of the prophets of Baal." The prophet, who had faced so many trials and witnessed the mighty miracles of God, now found himself gripped by a fear he had not known in years. It was as if the weight of every spiritual battle he had fought suddenly pressed down on him all at once. The fear, overwhelming and suffocating, pushed him to flee. Elijah ran, fleeing for his life into the desert, a barren, desolate place where the heat and silence mirrored his internal torment. The air was heavy, and the vast emptiness stretched endlessly in every direction. With every step, Exhaustion consumed him, his spirit crushed and his strength faded. Finally, he collapsed under a juniper tree, its meager shade offering little respite. In that moment of despair, Elijah, overwhelmed with anguish, sat down and cried out to God, his voice trembling with sorrow. "Enough, Lord. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." There, in the heart of the desert, as Elijah sank deeper into his misery, God's compassion was made known. An angel appeared, a gentle presence in the harsh wilderness. Elijah, still weak and defeated, was awakened by a soft touch. In front of him lay a freshly baked loaf of bread and a jar of water, an unexpected blessing in the middle of the barren land. "Get up, eat," the angel spoke, his voice calm and soothing, a balm to Elijah's broken heart. Elijah, feeling the heavy weight of fatigue lift slightly, ate and drank, but the exhaustion lingered. He fell back into a deep sleep, still fragile, still uncertain. Once again the angel called to him. "Get up, Elijah, for the journey is long." This time, with renewed strength from the divine sustenance, Elijah rose. He set off on a journey that would take 40 days and 40 nights. Each step was a test of endurance, not just physical but spiritual as well. His path led him to Mount Horeb, the very place where Moses had once encountered God. There, in the stillness of the cave, Elijah, now alone, heard the voice of the Almighty. "What are you doing here?" Elijah, his heart weighed down by the burden of despair, answered with a broken voice, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, but the Israelites have rejected your covenant. They have torn down your altars and killed your prophets. I am the only one left, and now they seek to take my life." But God did not respond immediately. Instead, Elijah was commanded to leave the cave and wait for a manifestation of the Lord. The silence of the mountain was soon shattered as a violent wind tore through the landscape, followed by an earthquake that shook the very foundations of the earth and a fierce fire that blazed across the hills. Yet, in none of these grand and dramatic displays did Elijah find the presence of God. As the storm subsided, the earth's tremors ceased, and the fire was extinguished, a profound silence settled over Mount Horeb. It was in this stillness, in this unexpected quiet, that Elijah heard a sound unlike any he had anticipated, a soft, gentle whisper. It was not the fearsome roar of the wind or the terrifying crack of thunder, but something intimate, a whisper so quiet that it seemed to speak directly to the very soul of the prophet. Elijah, deeply moved by the tender voice of the Lord, covered his face with his cloak and stepped out of the cave. The power of God was not in the tumultuous forces that had shaken the mountains, but in the quiet whisper that spoke of God's closeness and compassion. Again, the voice of God came to Elijah asking, "What are you doing here?" His voice, though still filled with sadness, carried the weight of a prophet who had fought tirelessly for the Lord. Elijah, feeling the weight of isolation, repeated his lament. "I am the last one left. The people of Israel have turned away, your altars are destroyed, and I am the only prophet standing. And now they seek to end my life." But God, in his infinite wisdom, revealed a greater plan. He instructed Elijah to return, not to continue the fight alone, but to take part in something bigger, to raise up new voices, and to anoint others to share in the mission. The moment arrived when Elijah passed on the mantle, both literally and figuratively, to the next generation. The baton was handed from Asahel, who had ruled over Syria, to Jehu, who was to become the king of Israel, and to Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who would take on the mantle of Elijah's prophetic mission. Elijah's weary heart found a renewed sense of purpose in this new calling. He was not alone as he had feared. God still had a faithful remnant in Israel, 7,000 who had not bowed to Baal. With his mission now revitalized, Elijah followed God's instructions and set out to find Elisha, a young man working in the fields, plowing the land with 12 yoke of oxen. Without a word, the prophet approached the young man and cast his mantle over him. This simple yet profound gesture signified the transfer of calling and responsibility. Elisha, without hesitation, abandoned his family, his land, and his former life, following the prophet and stepping into a journey that would reveal the incredible power of God in ways he could never have imagined. Meanwhile, the fate of Ahab and Jezebel, the wicked rulers of Israel, was swiftly approaching. Their downfall began with the tragic story of Naboth's vineyard. Naboth, a righteous man, owned a small vineyard that Ahab, consumed by greed, coveted. When Naboth refused to sell, Jezebel, ever the manipulator, devised a wicked scheme to have him falsely accused and murdered, paving the way for Ahab to seize the land. Elijah, the prophet of divine justice, was once again sent to confront the king. God's message was direct and unyielding. Because of the innocent blood that had been shed, Ahab's house would be destroyed, and Jezebel would meet a terrible end. the irony was not lost. Those who had used their power for evil would be undone by that very power. Elijah's prophecy was fulfilled and divine justice was served, proving that no evil escapes God's watchful gaze, no matter how triumphantly it may seem to stand. Having completed his earthly mission, Elijah now walked toward the end of his journey. Yet, unlike others, Elijah's end would not be marked by death. God had prepared something extraordinary for him. One fateful day, while Elijah and Elisha were together, the sky suddenly parted. A chariot of fire, pulled by blazing horses, descended swiftly, as if the heavens themselves had opened in divine majesty. Before Elisha could even comprehend what was happening, Elijah was taken up in a whirlwind, lifted into the heavens in full view of his disciple. Elisha's eyes widened in shock and awe as he cried out, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen." In that instant, Elijah was gone, but his legacy remained. The mantle that had fallen from Elijah's shoulders was picked up by Elisha, a powerful symbol that God's work would continue. It was not the end, but a new beginning. Clothed now in the spirit of his master, Elisha would walk the path Elijah had tread, with the same unwavering faith and courage. Elijah's life teaches us a profound lesson. No matter how isolated or burdened we may feel when we serve God, we are never truly alone. Elijah faced kings, multitudes of false prophets, and even the depths of despair in his own soul. Yet, in every critical moment, God was by his side, sometimes in the form of a mighty fire, sometimes in a gentle whisper. Like Elijah, we are called to trust in God, even when the world around us seems to be falling apart. There will be times when the world appears dry and hopeless, but if we listen to God's whisper and follow his lead, miracles can happen. Rain can return, and life can flourish in places where only a desert once stood. If you found the story of Elijah inspiring and want to continue exploring stories of faith and overcoming adversity, don't forget to like this video, share it with those you care about, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any new content. Together, let's dive deeper into the powerful lessons found in the Bible.